Hello out there.
Hello, hello, hello.
We got 3 people waiting in the chat. Hey, hit us up in the chat if you hear us because I wanna make sure my microphone's working. It looks like it is on the little dot thing down at the bottom. See. Hello. And we're actually a minute early, so people might still be joining up.
Yeah.
People went to get some popcorn. There's Chuck. Chuck, can you hear us?
Hello, Chuck. My microphone sounds quiet.
Yeah. Well, Chuck says, "Greeting. Hello." Uh-oh. Can you hear us? I assume he can hear us because he's not saying he can't. Yes, right on. There we go. That's what I needed to hear. All right. Well, if that changes, let us know in the chat. Okay. Yeah. So we got 7:00. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna send a quick note over on Patreon and remind people here. Let's see. Make sure I got my link in there. Probably share this. Make sure that's the right one. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, there we are. That was
Boom.
weird.
All right. So, yeah, I believe that went out to everybody. So let's start chatting. Read you 5x5. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm gonna check back on that and make sure it went out. Yeah. So we decided to do like a quick response video to the Rings of Power news right before this. So we're running up right against that. But yeah, this is episode 276, live stream January 2022. So welcome, fellow travelers.
Welcome.
Greta, what's up?
Hey. You know, the huge.
The huge?
Yeah.
You can handle the huge.
Yeah. It's crazy weather.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been having crazy rain all day, you guys. It's been awful. We had snow. It's just all crazy wet around
Yeah,
here
crazy
in
wet.
Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, we had snow, now we have rain, and the rain's supposed to turn to ice, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be nutty. But enough about the weather.
Enough about the weather.
Why are we all here?
Well, we're going to talk about all the things that our patrons want to talk about, especially with regard to the Silmarillion, Ainulindalë, and Valaquenta, and of course, the Rings of Power. So, the Rings of Power is the announced title of the Lord of the Rings on Prime TV show. So, what do y'all think? What do y'all think about that? Who's watched the trailer? So, we watched the trailer just a few minutes ago together. And Greta, you had some thoughts to share. So, what are those thoughts?
Yeah, I found it to be visually stunning, like just eye candy, just absolutely beautiful. And the music, the soundtrack, it's very appropriate, I would say.
Yeah.
And my only minor complaint was that it was very reminiscent of the movies, which after we talked about, I realized is not necessarily a bad thing. I guess I was just hoping for something a little bit more, different, creative. I mean, still sticking with the lore, obviously, but maybe just a little bit different style.
Right.
Kind of in the storytelling, but yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, I'm excited.
Yeah, well, it's it doesn't give you a lot to go with, but my reaction was essentially it looks very continuous with with the film series so far from what we've seen. I think that I really enjoyed their visual tying together of I think what they were alluding to essentially was you have the creation of the One Ring and you have the downfall of Numenor, right? Because you have the fire, like just images that look like the earth splitting open. Although I think those were actually supposed to be like close-ups of the different rivets and and such of the ring. And then you have the water right at the end, like rushing over the land, right? So that was really cool. I loved how they tied that together, and I'm like, okay, this is some our artistic storytelling, artistic visuals here. So poetic visuals, I guess you would say, right? Multi-layered
Poetic
visuals.
I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Yep. So I find that encouraging. And I, as we were saying when we did our other thing, I wouldn't really expect them not to go that route, right? I really think the first season's probably, I would be surprised if it's like a huge departure from what the visual language Peter Jackson established. I think they'll probably get more comfortable doing that eventually, but initially I think they're going to stick to it.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
we got some chat over here. All right. So Chuck said, me pretty stoked. Chuck's pretty stoked. And then Jonathan said it was a really look teaser. Haha. Jonathan, you're gonna have to clarify that one for me. I'm not sure what that means.
A look.
It was a really look teaser. I think you left out a word, maybe.
Maybe he meant good.
Good, possibly.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. It did look very nice, though.
It was a looker.
It was a looker.
Looker. And then long. There we go. It was a really long teaser. Haha. Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense.
True.
And Jonathan is being sarcastic, I think, being facetious. So
a whole minute.
Yes, the whole minute. But none of us woke up expecting that to happen today, so that was pretty cool. Chuck said, I wasn't really impressed with the video, but I'm really excited about covering the rise of Sauron and the forging of the rings. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's what a teaser is supposed to be. Ultimately, it's not really something that gives you a whole lot to work with, but it just kind of they let you know that they mean business, right? That they're coming.
For sure.
That it's coming.
For sure. Yep.
Ty says, watched it when you posted it to the Patreon page, was well done and smart fiscally to tie in a known feature of the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what bugged me a little bit. Like it just felt a little like, I've been here, done that, like same thing, rehashing, but
you're such a Tolkien nerd.
What can I say, guys?
Yeah, man. What can I say? High standards. Woo.
Yeah, I know. And I think I showed this in the video too. Like, I didn't hate the movies. Like, they're really good for what they are. I just wanted something different. I'm very much, this is, I think we've talked about this before, but this is like, I like to try new things and go new places for vacation. You like to find a place that you like and just keep going back.
Yeah.
And there's virtues in both, I think. But that's just me. I like variety, and I kind of just wanted something different.
Well, here's another thing to consider. I'm kind of glad that they are starting out by seemingly starting out by sticking to what is continuous with the visual lore, right? That Jackson established, right? And because I feel like that was really one of the better aspects of the films, like one of the true triumphs of the films, because I think that's an indicator that they'll probably be conservative in sticking to the sticking to the text and not departing from the lore that Tolkien himself established for the for the literary universe. So so Chuck says, can't compare with Cate Blanchett reading that opening verse. So are we all certain that was Galadriel? And that's one of the things we talked about in the video. Are we
and you said you can't imagine it be anybody else, right?
I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know who else they would choose other than Galadriel. Seems like the I mean, I think the top consensus, we know she's going to be on the show. And when they released that image back in September, we all essentially, I think the majority of people, the majority of knowledgeable fans, like said that's probably Galadriel, right? That's probably Galadriel. So anyway, I think that probably was. Chuck says, pretty sure that was the same character. Pretty sure that was the same character. Yeah. Ty says using a known feature could be the hook, but then they open up the massive amount of unfamiliar things all of us hope they go into. Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah. I hope you're right.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to, like, that's actually, they have to. So I kind of get what you're saying too, and I don't know if this is necessarily what you mean, but there's also this idea of like they didn't really show us. They showed us the One Ring, basically, right? That's all they showed us, and they didn't give us any of the things that we want to see that we haven't seen yet. So,
and there's nothing about Rings of Power, like, because the map was the initial like big thing was the map that had Numenor on it, right? So we're like, oh, this is going to be focused on Numenor, but there was nothing. I mean, yeah, we did talk about this, I guess, but I feel like the Rings of Power is just a little generic.
Yeah,
I'll be honest. I think it's generic. I wanted a little. Yeah, I wanted it to be different.
What did you want it to be?
No, I wanted it to have like, it's about Numenor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Second Age. It's like
the fall of Numenor, the Lord of the Rings, the fall of Numenor.
Yeah, something like that. Something that makes it just kind of at least allude to what the show is actually going to be about.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I thought it would have been cool if they had done like done different names for each season. So but I think again, like you have to recognize the massive amount of money that's been invested in this, and it's one of those just too big to fail kind of things. And I honestly think that's a pretty solid name. I get what you're saying,
fine.
but
You're definitely the more boring out of the two of us anyway.
Well,
so
this is true.
fine.
This is true. This is why I keep you on the show.
I'm not surprised you liked it. Let me just say that.
Chuck says, I wanted a musical. Oh, man. I am so glad it's not going to be a musical. I can appreciate a musical, but not in Lord of the Rings, not in Middle-earth. So it's not appropriate.
It's a good joke, though, Chuck. Yes. It's a good joke. Yes.
Ty says, The Dawn of a New Age. That would have been his preference, I think, for the title.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Red Hawk mentioned that, as far as the speaker, he says it's a new young Galadriel saying the old saying.
She is 3,000 years younger here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that argument can be made successfully, but it will be it'll be really interesting to see how much they try to make her look like a young Cate Blanchett or whether they take her in a very different direction, right? The actress. And I think they could probably do a good job of having her pass for her. But it, that's becoming a more and more relevant thing is all these different big intellectual properties like Star Wars that people want to tell stories in those universes. It's like, how do you do a young, how do you de-age these actors, right? And make younger versions of themselves when you want to tell stories that happened before other stories. So anyway.
Yeah, question. I mean, just based on this little teaser that we had today, I'm just going to expect them to try and make keep to the movies as much as possible. So I think they will try to make young Galadriel look like a young Cate Blanchett.
I think they're going to keep to the movies initially to try and get people to come watch it. And then once people are hooked, I think they'll feel better about the departure, right? That seems like a logical strategy to me.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I agree.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff they're introducing people to right off the bat for sure. I mean, they just have to, right? Because this is literally taking place. I mean, they can't spend the first season retelling The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, right?
Right.
They can't. They might be able to do some of that.
No, they can't because they don't have the rights to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We will see.
I'm really hopeful that that maybe we'll get some more trailers, maybe during the Super Bowl or some other big TV event that's coming up.
That would be cool. That would be very cool if we got a. Now, I wouldn't be surprised either if all they do is just reshow the show this during the Super Bowl, right? So it obviously made the rounds in like geekdom circles today. And was, it's like got almost 1 million views and was released less than 12 hours ago. But, they want to get it in front of everybody. Right. So they may do something new, but they may also just play this trailer. I've seen them do things like that before, I feel like. So, or this teaser. Yeah. So, well, continue feel free to continue to share. I'm going to write that here for other people who may show up late. Feel free to share your thoughts, 2 thoughts on the Rings of Power. There we go. All right. So moving on to other topics. So I wanted to share this. So we're going to talk a lot about correspondence. You guys in the chat, just pipe in with whatever chat you have, whatever topics you want to hit. If you got anything that's on your mind that's bugging you, especially stuff we covered in the last few episodes, feel free. But really, it's a grab bag as long as it's Tolkien related. So we had a lot of correspondence to hit, though. I loved this one, Greta. This is this is from. Hold on. Making sure that my Patreon, there we go, it went out. Okay, so we had a note that I thought you'd appreciate, Greta, from Allison W on YouTube back on January 7th.
Okay.
Allison said, "One comment for y'all. I'd like to hear more from Greta. Introverts for the win." Yeah. So
awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, did I not talk much on that one?
I guess you didn't talk enough for Allison. So I told her, I responded to her, and I was like, me too. You know, I always want to hear more from Greta. So,
oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to do better, but I'm glad that we are united in our introverting.
Yes.
We get one another.
All right.
Yeah.
Boom. Hey, so pronunciations. So this is one I've gotten a lot of feedback on various pronunciations in the last few weeks, and I'm always open to correction on this. But I have kind of an ace in the hole when it comes to these things, because I have like somebody who's probably I can't imagine there's somebody more knowledgeable than this person on Tolkien's languages. So I have an ace in the hole that I can immediately refer to and be like, "Am I saying this right?" That's kind of cool. Anyway, so let's see. I had a comment from Teddy. Teddy Zadi on December 28th. And let me pull this one up here. Oh, so this is actually not really Tolkien languages, though. This is on German, my German pronunciation. You can appreciate this, Greta. Did you know Greta used to speak German fluently?
I used to be fluent, guys.
When she was little, they lived in West Berlin, and she spoke German fluently.
Mm-hmm.
So Teddy says, I'm saying Beargeist wrong. Beargeist. So
where did we use the word Beargeist?
Well, Beargeist is the name of that painting that Gandalf, that Tolkien was inspired to create Gandalf from, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. So Teddy says Beargeist. You have to pronounce the G at the end. You pronounce it like Beargeist, which means bear spirit. Well, it kind of works. It's kind of Bjornish. Yeah. Berggeist, I guess is how I should be saying it. Yeah.
Beargeist.
Fine point, but I'll take the correction. I took German in high school, but I have not taken German since. So, all right. Ty says, forcing an introvert to talk more, like forcing Gollum to eat cooked fish. It's just wrong, you know. likes it nice and raw, precious. Yeah. All right. Juicy, sweet.
Chuck F said, or taters. Precious.
Or taters, precious. All right. Well, Teddy, thank you. And I do appreciate the pronunciation. This is probably one that I won't get right. It's a very fine point in my mind. Like, that's like, I gotta go Berggeist. All right.
Berggeist.
So the next one is from a Facebook comment on the way I say Illuvitar, apparently. What's up?
This is funny. I do think you say it funny.
Illuvitar?
I like to say it
Illuvitar.
Illuvitar.
Yep.
Tennessee. That's how I say it.
That's how we say it down here in Tennessee. Illuvitar.
Illuvitar.
Well, guess what?
What?
Turns out I say it right. So we had somebody comment on Facebook, and this is from Arthur Harrow. Arthur said, regarding the pronunciation of Illuvitar, I have heard both, but I lean towards the one from the audiobook because it translates as all father. And in the Germanic languages, that would be pronounced like Illu father, right? So Illu Vater, right? right? It's German, so German is like father is Vater.
Yes.
So I get his point, definitely get his point, but I did check that one. I checked it with my reference, and the reference said Illuvatar, right? So it's how I'm saying it, right? Illuvatar. I even sent this reference a voice memo and said it, and the reference was like,
very curious about who this reference is.
Well, I'll tell you later, but I don't want to necessarily. It's Tolkien himself. That would be crazy.
Oh man, that would be crazy.
Yeah,
like beyond crazy, actually. But good on you.
I have an in.
Good on you for knowing how to say Illuvatar.
That's right.
Illuvatar.
Well, I just want to clarify that apparently, according to a someone I would say is a is pretty solid Tolkien in their Tolkien linguistics, like well studied for a long period of time. That's what they said, Illuvatar, right? And this is important actually, because if you've read, I don't know if any of y'all who are watching have read the Silmarillion or listened to the Silmarillion audiobook, but on the part of the reason I asked was because Martin Shaw, who reads the Silmarillion, says it Illuvatar, right?
Oh, yes, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
What does he say? It actually, it's not quite like that. He says it more like, it's very flat the way he says it, Illuvatar, right? He said like it's more like that. And what's funny is this reference. I mentioned that to them, and they said, yeah, I got one sentence into the audiobook and I couldn't listen anymore
because it was just not.
And then it, when I went back and listened to the way he was saying it in the audiobook, I was like, it's not that bad. But then I listened to how he said aule, right? He says it aula. Aula. And I'm like, how can you get aula? That just doesn't land for me. So anyway, Illuvatar.
That's the only translation, or that's the only version?
In my opinion, at this point, it's the closest to the official way of saying it, right? So
okay.
Yeah, I feel good about that.
Good.
His source is Peter Jackson. No comment. So, Red Hawk says, how illuminating.
Well played.
But
I like that.
Nice.
That's good. Very clever.
That deserves an air 5. 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll give air 5s for good puns. Yeah.
It'll do it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Chuck deserves it. We got to go back and give Chuck a retroactive air 5 for the musical comment.
Oh
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So all right, 3, 2, 1. Nice. All right.
Good job, guys.
So next up, I already badmouthed the Silmarillion audiobook. Aula. The last pronunciation note that I wanted to hit was about Círdan, the proper pronunciation of Círdan. So, and this is actually not with regard to how you pronounce the C, whether it's a hard C or a soft C, right? That was not a dispute. The dispute comes from Alfred V on January 5th, and Alfred says, "Great episode as usual. Tolkien Gateway pronounces Círdan as Círdan. That is to say, the Dan is pronounced like van or man in English. Oh, Círdan. All right, they say Círdan. I believe you say Círdan as on pond or on my way. But of course, I could be completely off. Clarify, please. Thanks much." And this is another one where I asked my reference, and they said it is in fact Círdan, right? So it is a, it's more like the my name is Dawn, right? Or like the dawn sunrise. So.
Oh, instead of Anne.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So let me find that comment here. So yeah, the sound of a in U.S. English can does not exist in Sindarin or Quenya. A is always the ah sound in father, right? So Círdan. Yeah. So Chuck F Air 5 just back, right? Got the Air 5 back. Nice. Thanks, Chuck. All right. So yeah, that's it for our pronunciations, corrections. Got a couple of comments to share from episode 271, which was our discussion with Carl Hostetter. So Carl, he shared some his own opinions on the on the films, right? And really, he has what I would more characterize as a more pessimistic view of the films, right? He's like, I would say you and I are more like, hey, it brings people to it. It's not all perfect, but you know. And Carl, I think, had more of an attitude of it's getting it. Actually, his take was it doesn't. What was it? It's the things it leaves in, and like the way it portrays them. Am I getting that right? Anyway, I'm probably butchering it because I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. But I'm going to read the comments that people left in regard to Carl's take on the films. So the first one comes from Jeffrey Alton Carter. Jeffrey had 2 comments. So let's hit this here. So Jeffrey says, I totally agree with Carl. There are many character scenes and character arcs that are totally out of place and shouldn't have been included in the films. More so, there's even more content that was not included and should have been. Yeah. So it was that Carl thought that there were certain things that were included in the film that shouldn't have been there. Right. And that was, because he was like, a lot of people complain because they think there were things left out. I'm like, there were things they shouldn't have put in. So, I still tend to be more optimistic about the films, but I definitely appreciate Carl's perspective, and it was definitely interesting to hear it there, especially given how long he's been into. He was not a person that came to Tolkien because of the films, like many of us are. I think it's easier to appreciate them when you're like, these films brought me to Tolkien, which opened up this world for me. Another note from Jeffrey. I still wish someday a film creator will interpret and film the parts of Tolkien's story where the hobbits are at Farmer Maggot's house, or Farmer Maggot's, and also when they're in the Old Forest and then stay at the house of Tom Bombadil. That would truly delight me.
I think that's one of the specific things we talked about.
Yeah.
Was the absence of Tom Bombadil, which is a frequent criticism, obviously. But yeah, Ty mentions that he says, I got the sense he being Carl felt it actually takes viewers away from Tolkien's actual vision of the story, then invites them in.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that, right? So let me put this over here and see if I can make the chat a little bigger because we're like squinting trying to read it. I can definitely see how I think the fear like Carl's perspective is that people watch the films and they think that's what it's all like, that's the end all be all, because a lot of people never go deeper into the works and that sort of thing. So that's a very, like, I can see it from that perspective. So and he was fair enough. I mean, he basically said, like, to the extent that they bring people into the books and get them reading more of those things, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So
yeah.
All right, Jeffrey, thank you for your comments.
Indeed.
All right. And then we have another comment from Mr. Lynn Ruat from January 3rd.
On the same episode.
Yeah. I was blown away that he came out and just straight said, I'm not a fan concerning the films. It seems very gatekeeping to me. I grew up with my father reading the books to me, and when the movies came out, I was and remain ecstatic that millions of people who otherwise would never dip a toe into Tolkien were able to experience even a small portion of something that I love, regardless of the flaws and changes. I think we all know, like was said in the video, that the books are generally much better than the films. But damn, I thought he did a great job bringing it to the wider world. The adaptation of The Hobbit, on the other hand, was just a bad set of movies, regardless of their faithfulness or complete lack of. Those movies were just bad. So, yeah, I think, and I don't think Carl's trying to spoil anybody's fun by saying any of that, right? I think he's just trying to offer the perspective of someone who's invested much of their life in studying and appreciating Tolkien, even before the films came along. And again, it would be a very different perspective if we were a person who had been into all this stuff before Jackson kind of planted his flag, his own visual flag and storytelling flag into the series, into the world. Yeah. So in a very big way. So
yeah. I agree.
But
we're all entitled to our opinions.
Well, we are. Yeah. Just make sure you got, you can kind of defend them, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So, yes. All right. Next up is on that last one for this topic is from Lynn Maudlin on December 27th. All right. How many Tolkien fans by way of PJ movies who end up reading the books don't notice the fundamental and literally essential, as in essence, essential differences between Tolkien's books, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings? Sadly, quite a few. Yeah. So, and I think that's the perspective of, well, maybe that's not quite the that's like a little step further on Carl's perspective. Maybe if you've seen the movies and then you go read the books, maybe what Lynn's arguing is that the movies color your perception of the books, right? Like color the way that you envision the books. And you know, and so maybe it takes a couple of reads to, split those two apart, right? And to kind of have your own vision for things. That is a risk with making a film of a book that already exists, of a story that already exists.
That's why
a
you
visual
should always read the
depiction.
book first.
Yeah. So
yeah.
All right. Okay, moving on to our next topic, which is a little rehash. We got some feedback, really good feedback on our Christmas run, and I wanted to hit some highlights there. So we're going to go back and hit a few things from that. First of all, Greta, you asked a really interesting question. Is there snow in the Middle East? And somebody actually answered that for us on December 14th. This is, let's see, this is Trek Beat TK. Greta asked about if it gets cold in the Middle East. I can say I have it on good authority that in Israel there is a winter, and they do even get snow at times. So yes, I am sure there are nights it gets cold. Bethlehem is on roughly the same latitude as the southern USA and the Florida Panhandle. So probably no blizzards, but yeah, cold nights.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. So
yeah.
There you go. We do get some snow in the Middle East. So that, I think we're asking that question because it's like we always associate snow with Christmas time. And is that just because of our, a lot of us have this European heritage, right? In the US, we have a very strong European heritage, and that they were more inclined to get snow during that time, or was there actually snow in that region of the world during that time?
I think, was it mentioned in the poem Noel as well? I think that's what we were talking about, right?
Is.
Was this the snow and
this one was in response to our episode 269 on that poem.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. Red Hawk says, speaking of snow, how much did Melkor let y'all have? So yeah, we got this week we got how much?
Just a couple.
Couple inches, but it was just a mess. Just a mess.
It was yuck.
Yeah.
Like the snow we got like a week or so ago was this really pretty fluffy white. We got like 4.5 inches of that. You couldn't pack it, so we couldn't have snowball fights. So that was kind of a bummer. But it was beautiful. But yeah, this last like couple inches was like this slushy, like wet. It was like white rain.
Yeah. Right, white frozen rain.
White frozen rain. It was very bizarre and just messy.
One of Melkor's most awful creations, perversions.
Yeah.
Yes.
But just a couple inches of that. So if we're going to have more, I would have preferred it to be the fluffy, which is what we got a couple weeks ago. But yeah.
Hey, what's up, Sarah Murphy? How are you? All right. So
that's right. She lives here, so she knows.
Oh yeah.
Gross, heavy, wet.
Gross, heavy, wet. That's right.
It was totally heavy and wet and just and really cold. We didn't even go out in it. It just wasn't even worth dressing up to go out in it. Although I saw lots of snowmen. Lots of people made snowmen out of this snow. Yeah. That was one thing it was good for, I guess.
Chuck says 16 inches in upstate New York. Wow. Lots.
That's like
lots
over
of snow.
Wow.
And Sarah says, hopefully nothing tonight and no wintry whatever. Yeah, for reals. I'm over this is Middle Tennessee. We're not supposed to get more than like one snowfall, per winter. So
I know we've had like 3 so far.
Yeah.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, Red Hawk. He said 7-ish in North Carolina with a lot of bad drivers. That's the other thing.
That's the problem about the South, right? If you get snow in the South.
It's so true. Yeah.
Chuck says, didn't break a sweat. Hold my beer. Yeah. So
awesome.
Yeah. The upstate New York. Yeah. The upstate New York power. You live north, right? You live north of, the middle of the country, and it's just normal for you. But for all of us down here, it's Snowmageddon. It's like, we're all going to die.
It's totally
everything shuts down.
Snowmageddon. Yep.
Yep. All right. Hey, we got a few notes for tonight from Marilyn the librarian, who always writes really amazing notes. So this one is on, the first one I'm going to read is on Father Christmas and Noel from December 16th. So she says, "Hello, Carswells. I'm catching up on a few episodes here, both of which are certainly seasonal. First, the 1933 Father Christmas letter. Tolkien couldn't have been thinking of Nazgul on fell beasts when he described goblins riding bats, because in 1933 he'd not thought of Nazgul yet. He was just beginning to share the Hobbit manuscript with a few trusted friends, and had only gotten as far as the death of Smaug. Lord of the Rings wasn't even dreamed of at that point. To me, goblins riding bats sounds much more like the Battle of Five Armies, though that hadn't happened yet in 1933 either. It wasn't until around March of 1938 that Tolkien wrote the first draft of the appearance of a mysterious rider on the East Road in the Shire, and at that point he didn't know who or what the rider was. In fact, at first he thought the rider would be Gandalf, even down to the sniff. See the Return of the Shadow volume from the History of Middle-earth for more on this. As for the 1941 letter describing goblin wars at the North Pole, again, this was too soon to be a reflection of Helm's Deep, which wasn't written for the first time until 1942. To me, it sounds again like the Battle of Five Armies, in which the defenders of the Lonely Mountain are surrounded by goblins who climbed the back side of the mountain and came flooding down. According to an article in the Oxford Mail based on archives in the Bodleian Library, I think that's how you say that word, the reason why Oxford wasn't bombed in World War II was that Hitler planned to use it as his capital after he conquered England, so he ordered it not to be damaged. Oh. And she gives a link for that. That's really interesting. I had never heard that before. As a total World War II history buff, that's a really fascinating notion. And I like talking about, like, I find it interesting, like, what were the different plans of the different powers if they had won, or like what alternative history scenarios, right? So that's a really interesting one to hear, that Hitler wanted to use Oxford as the capital of Great Britain if he had won.
Can't blame him. I can't blame him. It's beautiful.
Well, it is a beautiful place. It is a beautiful place, and I'm glad he had, in all of his twisted mentality, he had a reason to spare it from bombing, right? Because it's a very historic place, obviously. So she says, "Hurrah for librarians and archivists." So, boom. Just to finish up this note from her, "I'm also glad that Bingo Baggins eventually became Frodo, though your reflections on this led me to think of the following. There was a hobbit had a ring, and Frodo was his name. Oh." Yeah, and she apologizes to all of us for planting that in our heads. So, yeah. Ty says, "Marilyn is just awesome." You're right. You're right. She is. Also, in the wonderful heyday of 1960s Tolkien popularity in the U.S., in addition to the Frodo Lives buttons, there was the one saying Gandalf for president. I have a recent reissue of the Frodo Lives button, but I don't think anyone has picked up on Gandalf for president yet. That's great.
Oh, that is awesome.
Need 2024 to come around, and then we need to do that. So, finally, Hammond and Skoll, in their invaluable 3-volume revised edition of J.R.R. Tolkien Companion and Guide, wrote that the Abingdon Catholic School, which published the poem Noel in their 1936 school journal, had been founded by the Sisters of Mercy in 1860. Tolkien met some of the sisters in one of his hospital stays during the First World War, and so this may be the beginning of his connection with the school. Boom. There you go.
So many knowledge bombs.
I know. Well, balloons, right? She prefers knowledge balloons.
That's right. That's right. Knowledge balloons.
So
not water ones, though, right?
Well, that can be fun.
It can be.
It can be fun
when it's hot and not snowing.
This is true. You don't want it to be cold out when you get a water balloon dropped on you. Yeah. So, Marilyn, more to come from Marilyn on this episode. Yeah. Well, and Sarah asked a pertinent question, right? Would Gandalf want to be president? That's exactly, I think, why Gandalf. Like I have said in the last several years, like, a prerequisite to somebody being president is that, like, they should not want to be president, right? It's like
it should be forced.
It should almost be like a thing where it's like, and obviously you can't force somebody to take the office, but it's like, how do you gauge that somebody is doing it, like, reluctantly? Like, it's like they did not put themselves up to us, because I feel like the people who get put into political power, it's because it's like been their life's ambition, and they want to be, like, they want to be president,
like
or they want to be, yeah. And I'm just like, that to me is a disqualifier right there. Like, you, I just,
there was a president in our history who really didn't want to be president, wasn't there?
Was there?
And yet they basically.
Well,
I feel like it's
there is and I don't know how historically true this is, but there's the there have been, like, different cases in the church of like bishops and popes who have not wanted to take the office, and then they agree to take it, right?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if there's a specific president that has ever done
that's
that.
Right, Ty. George Washington. Maybe that's who I was
thinking. Oh yeah,
of.
You're right. You're right about that. Yeah, I had forgotten about that, but you're right. He did not. He really did not want to do it at first. He was, I think, content with just being the general that had won the led us in the Revolutionary War.
I was thinking it was Ulysses S. Grant. I knew it was a general, but I think Ty's right. I think it was Washington.
Gandalf can't be president. They could not lead the wizards. Oh well, he's not allowed to like take that job. You say like he literally is objectively not allowed to take that job, which is a fair point. But
indeed,
but still, somebody like Gandalf, right? Yeah, I think we can all get behind that sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, if not, think about July 4th under Gandalf's presidency.
Yeah,
right. The fireworks alone.
That would be amazing, right? Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
July the 4th would be awesome.
Yeah.
Sarah says, I believe there's truth to the bishops and whatnot thing as well during a certain era of the church when it was practically a death sentence. Yeah, well, there's that too.
There's that. Yep.
Yeah. So Red Hawk, just back to the snow thing. The South shares one snowplow, right? Yeah. So we have, I think, a grand total in the southern states of one snowplow to get around.
Well, Sarah made the comment that you have plows and treated roads up north, which is true.
Yeah.
We don't really. Like Red Hawk says, we share one snowplow.
Yeah, Ty, I think Wormtongue is like the reality of a lot of politicians, unfortunately. And
I think we've actually used that analogy recently.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So more to come from Marilyn on this episode. And then we have a note from David Bigwood in regard to our Christmas run through, which I haven't heard from David in a few weeks. So this was a cool one to get. So David says, Dear Greta and John, I hope you had a good New Year's. Just a couple of random thoughts from some more or less recent episodes. That Hideous Strength, the C.S. Lewis novel. It is quite a bit different than the other books in the space trilogy. That's because Lewis had met and been reading Charles Williams. Williams is a very different author than anyone else. His novels are worth a read. The Place of the Lion and The Greater Tarot are perhaps my favorites. Weird, not like anything else I can think of. His poetry gets into corporal punishment in what I find an unpleasant way. Maybe give one of his novels a try, then give That Hideous Strength another go. It will give some insight as to what Lewis was trying to do. And I do like his wild, edgier Merlin. So I have actually been listening to an audiobook version of That Hideous Strength. And it's tough. It's still tough for me. And it's someone who just loves and appreciates Lewis so much. I'm determined to make it through. And I'm like, maybe it'll be like for the Silmarillion, how the Silmarillion was for me with Tolkien. I'll get through That Hideous Strength, and then I'll just appreciate Lewis on a whole nother level at that point and everything else that he wrote. But, I'm not quite there yet with That Hideous Strength. So, David says, Noel reminds me of the Advent lyrics. It's been ages since I've read them. I'll have to pull them out and see if the memory is correct. I'm thinking number 5 or 6 is like Noel, covering the time before and after the Nativity. Tolkien would surely have known these old English poems. Yeah, so I think that's a reference to the O antiphons, right? So
yeah, the Advent lyrics. Okay.
Yeah, with the Advent lyrics. Looking forward to your reread of the Silmarillion. The last time I reread it, I skipped the appendix. Your most recent episode made me think they are due for a reread. Got a book of Pogo comic strips and the lyrics book by Paul McCartney for anniversary and Christmas gifts, so it will have to be after I finish those. Right. So, priorities. Yes. Pogo comics. I have not thought of Pogo the comic strip in years. I used to read that when I was a kid, like the funny pages every day. Thanks for all your work you do to put this together. I did a 5 to 10 minute podcast in the early 2000s for the library. Each of those took an hour to put together. Planning, recording, post-recording, cleanup, and posting. Some of it has gotten simpler. I was writing the RSS by hand, but it just takes a good bit of time and effort. Thanks.
Aww.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your appreciation, David. And certain aspects are still better, but it's one of those things where the technology improves and all of a sudden you have to kind of up your game because everybody else is upping their game. Right. So anyway, but do it for love. I do it for love, people. I love Tolkien. I love you all. So anyway,
it's all worth it.
It's all worth it.
I mean, I say that having no experience about what goes into producing a podcast.
Greta's like, it's all worth it. Yep. I just come out here and talk for a little while and then
Yeah, that's really all I do, guys. I just show up. I sometimes read, sometimes if I feel like it. If I'm not reading something better.
Giving away all your secrets. All right. So that's it for our Christmas correspondence. Hit some correspondence on our Silmarillion episodes. All right. So we have a couple notes from William B. This is from December 30th. Actually, let me go back and do something here. So,
what are you doing?
Sorry, never mind. All right. No, I want to read. Sometimes I correspond with people on multiple notes, and I get confused as to which one I'm gonna read here. All right. So, William says. So William had been corresponding with me about reading the Silmarillion, and he's currently like way back in the past listening to our very old episodes, and I told him, hey, we're doing newer episodes now, right, on the Silmarillion, so you should join us. And William said, I will absolutely. To share a hack unsolicited I found by happy accident that works well for me. I listen ahead of my reading to your podcast, just a chapter. Then when I read the chapter, it seems to fall into place better. I know this flies in the face of hundreds of years of structured academia where subject matter is read. It makes little or no sense to the student. Then the teachers explain it to defeated and crestfallen students post-digestion. This is my second read through, so for me, it is more about details and the beauty of the storytelling and less about spoilers, but I wanted to share. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfectly fine way of doing it, whatever works for you at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's why we made the podcast in the first place.
Indeed.
So, yeah. And he just shared this note. He said, again, thanks for everything. I'm an avid reader, but the Silmarillion is hard, like reading an adventure story if the names, places, and some of the things were in Portuguese, but sometimes Mandarin was used for those names of peoples and places. Yeah. It can be a little jarring with all the different names that are thrown in. All right. Yeah. So, hey, y'all still alive over in the chat? All right. Okay. Moving on to...
Stick with us, guys. Stick with us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we got GK Alive. My most recent read, I read Silm Guide before each chapter. Oh, cool. My website. Is that right?
Is there another Silm Guide that you know
of? No, I have silmguide.com. So yeah,
it's probably yours.
I'm always like, how many people type that in, type in Slim Guide thinking that they're going to pull up a weight, like a weight loss. Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So our next note comes from GK Alive on January 1st. GK Alive says, this is so crazy. I remember reading The Fellowship of the Ring and reading about characters mentioned by Elrond to Frodo, how if Beren, Tuor, and someone else, LOL, was seated there, Frodo would be seated among them, and Aragorn quoting poetry about Beren and Luthien and not having a clue who these people were and wanting to fully understand and grasp the Lord of the Rings experience. This is kind of a long run-on sentence, by the way. I stopped reading The Fellowship of the Ring and bought the Silmarillion and looked for a podcast that broke the book down and explained it chapter by chapter, and I found yours. Yay! I didn't think the Silmarillion was hard, as I would read a chapter, listen to your podcast, and read the chapter again, and it turned into my favorite book, while this all only happened at the start of 2019. It's so amazing to listen now to your podcast live, so to speak, rather than a couple of years after. It feels great to now, as a Silmarillion expert, thanks, John and Greta, I feel honored to now contribute and hopefully have my views expressed and see what you think of them. So looking forward to the next few months.
Nice.
So
that's great. That's music to our ears.
Absolutely. Always love those kind of notes.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah. So,
and that's a huge, that's really the big thing with the Silmarillion, is it enriches your enjoyment of the Lord of the Rings, because there's so much that you learn by reading the Silmarillion that is mentioned in the Lord of the Rings books.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you go back and read the Lord of the Rings, and it just enriches all that because you understand so many more of the references in the work. So it's all one big virtuous cycle. So next up is from Paul B on January 10th. Paul says, I just wanted to drop a line and say thanks for all your work and to brag a little bit. I really enjoyed the podcast and appreciate the insights you both offer. I've enjoyed the Silmarillion reread podcast so far, and I wanted to let you know that I actually won't be joining you for the reread, but I'll still enjoy the episodes. Here's why. In April of last year, I decided to do a Tolkien in timeline order reading project. I started with the Silmarillion, which is rapidly becoming my favorite Tolkien work, actually. went through the standalone texts of The Fall of Gondolin and the Children of Hurin. Then I dove into Unfinished Tales. After that, I tackled The Hobbit, which was great because it had been a very long time since I've read that. And then, of course, the project culminated with my favorite book and one of the greatest books of all time, The Lord of the Rings. I finished it a little before Christmas. That is quite an epic run of reading.
That's impressive.
I know it took me a while, but having read through all those texts in order gave me a much deeper appreciation for The Lord of the Rings when I got there. Of course, if there's anyone new to Tolkien, I would absolutely not recommend getting to The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings the way I did this past year, but I had read these texts separately a bunch of times. My count is the Silmarillion 4 times and Lord of the Rings 6 times, and thought it would be fun to try reading Tolkien's Middle-earth works in order. Over the Christmas break, my wife and I enjoyed all extended editions of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings films. I got to be a little snobbish while watching because the texts were fresh in my mind, so I could point out the similarities and differences pretty quickly. It's hard to resist, especially if you're sitting there with somebody who doesn't know the books as well. Be like, oh, that's totally wrong. That's not how it happened. Yeah. It's pretty amazing how much the theatrical cuts differ from the text. I find the extended editions are much closer to the text with Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit films are, well, fun and exciting, but there are many times when I was like, did they read the same book I did? Yeah.
Right? Yes.
I also really enjoyed the Carl Hostetter episodes and look forward to purchasing the History of Middle-earth book. It's the Nature of Middle-earth. So the History of Middle-earth is a much longer series. I'm also beyond excited for the Amazon Prime series. I share many of the concerns you've articulated, but I'm hopeful that they will do the right thing with the series. Tolkien teaches us to have hope, even if it's a fool's hope, right? You are so right. You are so right, Paul. Yeah. So, and I want to say it's not even a fool's hope. I really think that I really want to feel hopeful that they're going to do right by Tolkien. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be things that, we're going to be unhappy with, but overall, I'm just excited that we're all going to have something to really just totally geek out about. And, and it opens up the future, I feel like, of Middle Earth for us, in a really positive way. So
I agree.
I'm feeling pretty positive. Hey, tell us in the chat, like, are you feeling positive or not, right? About Latron Prime. I'm just interested to hear what you all think. And did you agree? You're overall positive? Yeah.
Overall positive.
Yeah.
Except for the title, but whatever. I'm over it.
Yes. Except for the title.
Which is only, going to be the title for the next 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
The series is on the air. So I guess I better learn to like it.
So Sarah asked, do we have a rating for it yet? So you mean like TV MA kind of thing?
That's a good question.
I don't think we do, but man, I'm really hoping it's like, so I think the films were all PG-13, if I recall. And I think that's the equivalent is what I'm hoping they're aiming for with this, because, if they go full on Game of Thrones with this thing, that's going to be too much for people. Like I don't know. That's going to be disappointing because I just feel like that doesn't line up with Tolkien's ethos. And that doesn't line up with the audiences that are going to want to watch this thing. So people are going to want to watch this with their kids, and it doesn't need to be, the pessimistic, graphic, horrendous things that sometimes got shown on, with Game of Thrones. Not to say it needs to be all sunshine and, just like a Disney movie or something like that, but it needs to understand who's going to be watching it. So
yeah.
Sarah, and that's a good question, Sarah. Can we really get that, knowing of the second age material?
Get what?
Like, can we get a TV 14 rating? Because the second age is there's some dark things that happen in the second age.
Dark. Yeah, that's true.
I think it really just depends on how they do, like how they do it, right? I feel like this is a lost art in Hollywood, right? For so long they would tell stories, and we'll just say like the golden age of Hollywood, and they had all of the same things in there, right? But like they just weren't as graphic in the way that things were depicted, right? They didn't have to show every single sex scene in detail, right? They didn't have to show every single battle scene in all of its gory glory. Now I think there'll probably be pretty intense battle scenes because the films had those, but I think even with those you can do those without making them like 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 Braveheart level, which I love that movie. I love Braveheart, but man, that Braveheart movie, you watch that and you're just like, wow, that's what war is really like. That's what it was, that's what it's like for, people getting just beheaded in the middle of an open field,
Yeah. So there's a way to allude to all that, like, to still get that effect, right? And to know the extent of whatever's going on without being completely explicit about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and Sarah goes on. I mean, she says, I mean, if we're talking human slavery and sacrifices, I mean,
it's true.
It's totally very dark stuff, to be sure, right? But my thing is they don't necessarily have to. So I think like I don't know the different TV rating. I think it's TV 14 to me. Like I want to, like, I feel like if it's like, I want to be able to watch it with my kids, and we got a pretty high threshold. I mean, so we have a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old, and we're getting to that point where we watch things that previously would have been very uncomfortable for us, but we watch them now with them, like The Office, because they're just like obsessed with The Office. And there's a lot of like, just humor and stuff like that on The Office, where it's a little bit more like, watching this with my kids. All right. But and just topics of conversation, but it's like, I think you got to recognize that, like, you don't want it to be uncomfortable for like the parents who are watching this with their kids, right? You can show stories of slavery and human sacrifice without showing those things and all of their disgusting, horrible detail, right? Like the gruesome, like the absolute gruesomeness, right? I feel like that's kind of my line, and that's my perspective, and I'm sticking to it. You can still tell the story that involves those things without doing that. So
it's just need a deft hand.
Hey, Ty knows what I'm talking about. He says, lost art form and film these days. You are 100% right.
Implying things is
So, and Sarah, and I'm glad to hear you don't disagree, Sarah, it's I just want us all to be like hopeful, because there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people out there who are really excited. There's a lot of people out there who are just like, oh, they're going to screw everything up. They're going to do it all wrong. They're going to make it, this and that. And I'm like, people, just give them a chance, like before you see anything. It's okay to say, like, it's okay to be critical after you've seen the thing, right? But you don't know yet, right? Don't cast judgment before you know a thing, because it's gonna hurt your own perception of something you might otherwise enjoy.
It's true. Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like we got caught in the middle of Paul's note here.
Did we?
Did we hit it all? Yeah, I think we
missed the part where he said, "Don't read this on the podcast."
Oh, he said no need to read this on the podcast. Sometimes that happens. It's like, if you're going to tell me not to read it on the podcast, put it at the very top. Right? Oh boy, I just read that on the podcast.
By the way, please don't read. Oops.
Yeah.
No. All good.
All good. All right. So
very good thoughts.
Very excellent thoughts from Paul.
That's an interesting time. So he's reading the books like in order of, like, I'm trying to think of the timeline. So like the timeline as far as the stories go, not as far as when they were published, obviously.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So, you know what? I think I got a lot more correspondence here. I think we're gonna finish up. We're gonna do Marilyn and then another one from Carol here, and then I think we're gonna save the rest of it for our later, for our next live stream, which will be sometime in February, forthcoming. So let me hit a couple more notes here from Marilyn. One from Marilyn on January 5th. Revisiting Silmarillion and haiku. Hello, Carswalds. Happy New Year and all the very best for 2022. It will be lovely to do another walk through Silmarillion with you both. In response to this week's episode, I think it's good to remember, when faced with uncertain or even conflicting information, that Tolkien often changed his mind over time with various aspects of the legendarium: plot, timeline, names, characters, etc. Considering that it was written over a period of almost 60 years, that's not surprising. Indeed, there were some stories that were so tangled with contradictions that neither he nor Christopher ever did resolve them. Looking at you, Galadriel and Celeborn. Speaking of Galadriel and Celeborn, your question about Legolas's elvish ancestry is answered in Unfinished Tales in the chapter on those two mighty figures. Appendix B of that chapter is titled The Sindarin Princes of the Sylvan Elves, and states that in Appendix B to Lord of the Rings, it says that in the Second Age, after the destruction of Beleriand, many of the Sindar moved eastward and established realms among the Sylvan Elves, and that Thranduil, king in the north of Greenwood the Great, was one of these. Thranduil's folk, i.e. Sylvan or Nondor, moved northwards from the area of Lorien, so they were originally neighbors and kin of that group, to the woods around the Lonely Mountain, before either dwarves or dragon came there. At this time, Odofer, father of Thranduil, who was father of Legolas, was king. Apparently, he resented the growing power of the dwarves of Moria and the settling of Celeborn and Galadriel and Lorien, and so he removed to the more northerly regions. Despite this desire for solitude and freedom, Orofer did realize that when the last alliance was formed to fight Sauron, all folk would be needed to defeat him, and so he led a great army of Sylvan elves to join with a smaller army from Lorien to fight in the Battle of Dagorlad. The Sylvan elves were poorly armored and equipped, nor were they inclined to put themselves under the orders of Gil-galad, a Noldoran exile, and so they lost more folk than any of the other elvish armies in the Dead Marshes. Orofer himself, leading his folk, charged into the assault on the gates of Mordor before Gil-galad gave the signal to advance and was killed. But his son Thranduil survived and eventually led back only a third of the host that had set out from Greenwood the Great. Tolkien also writes in this section that Thranduil never forgot the horror of Mordor, and so he continued to retreat northward until he established his realm in the northeast of the forest and created his underground halls and fortress, reminiscent of Thingol's caves of Midigroth and Doriath. Though without the great wealth of Thingol and the skill of dwarvish construction, Thranduil's halls were pretty simple by comparison. The few Sindar that originally came east with Orofer joined with the Sylvan elves they found in language, names, and customs intentionally. They had come from the ruin of Doriath, and so they held no love for the Noldor, nor for other Sindarin who were under the sway of the Noldor. They wished indeed to become Sylvan folk and to return, as they said, to the simple life natural to the elves before the invitation of the Valar had disturbed it. So yes, Legolas is a Sylvan elf by language and culture, even though his ancestry could be said to be Sindarin. And it seems to me that this ties in nicely with the description of the woodland elves in The Hobbit. Wilder, more dangerous, and yet still elves, and thus good people. And then we read her haiku on our Ainulindalë episode. But man, dropping again floating knowledge balloons, right? Coming back down on us as water balloons. Yep. Yeah, but that's a great history of Legolas, and I mean it's there, right? So I think this came up in the context of understanding the different tables of the elves, right? And, the family tree of the elves
and descendants, and
yeah. So all right, and so amazing letter from Marilyn, and we're gonna do one more from Carol W on January 17th. Carol says, "Thank you so much for your podcast. It is helping me to really understand the Silmarillion. Over the past 50 years, I've read The Lord of the Rings many times. However, I was unsuccessful each time I tried to read the Silmarillion. It is wonderful to experience your podcast because I can tell how much it truly means to you."
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
That is really cool.
Thanks so much, Carol. Yeah. So, man, covered a lot of ground here. A lot of interesting topics on our from our correspondence. So, and I need to put these chat questions up here earlier next time. I'll save these for next time. I had some chat questions. It's only our second time doing this, and really our first time of having it be a standard thing. So figuring out the format, you guys, but this has been fun. Thanks for joining up with us, and definitely going to do one next month. And really enjoyed chatting with you all. Before we check out, any last questions?
Well, there was some stuff we didn't cover.
Okay, yeah, hit it, Greta. I think you need to be my the chat person.
I like the chat. I think that's fun. So okay, I think we left off with Ty says, even if they screw it up, talking about the Latron Prime, he says, even if they screw it up, imagine all the podcast content there will be.
Yeah,
exactly. There will be lots to talk about. That is true. And then Sarah said, I think the thing that always makes me hesitate is the fact that Tolkien himself was like, these stories don't need to be told. Like, meaning they don't need to be like put into like visual form.
Well, and so I think Sarah may have left.
Because she finished dinner, and I'm really impressed that she was making dinner while chatting and listening to this. That's impressive.
So, but maybe if Sarah goes back and watches this, I'd just be interested to know like where Tolkien indicated that, just because I don't know. I feel like in other places he's like, I want other people to take, he talked about like art and like music and this kind of thing, right? That's a quote we read on last week's episode, on the Valaquenta episode. So I don't know if he did say that. I'd find it interesting to find out where that is.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he did. I don't know that he did. So anyway, Sarah, if you do go back and watch this, if you can find that quote, send it to me, because I definitely would love to like look into that more, for sure.
And she also asked, has there been a timeline made that includes History of Middle-earth? Do you know? Because Paul was saying he read all those books like according to a timeline.
Yeah, I mean, History of Middle-earth is tough because you can't really work. I mean, if you're talking about a reading timeline, not that I know of, but I guess you could read it. You could read everything in the order in which it was published, right?
We just said that wasn't the order that Paul was reading them in, right?
I don't think it was.
Okay.
I don't think it was.
So you don't know of one that includes History of Middle-earth?
No, and remember, it's done in a way that reflects the historical textual development, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's almost like an author biography, right? It's an author's work told through a volume of works, right? Like how it developed over time. So
gotcha.
But there is a lot of interesting material in there about the timeline of Middle-earth itself, especially of the earlier periods of Middle-earth's history. So yeah. So hey, there's Eric. Thanks for doing this, guys. Hey, Eric, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for thanking us.
Thank you for joining in.
All right.
One more comment from Ty here. He says, I concur, Sarah. Apprehension is only natural to feel. After all, can anyone truly capture the entirety of what Tolkien did? No, but many Tolkien-inspired things do it well and with respect to it. That is true.
Boom.
That is true. And hopefully the Tron Prime is going to follow in those footsteps.
I'm remaining hopeful until they give me a reason not to be.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's where I'm at.
That's fair. I think that's a good place to be.
So,
yeah.
Well, y'all, this was a lot of fun.
It was.
And thanks for showing up, and thanks for chatting with us.
Yeah,
and we will talk at you next time.
Indeed, we will.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.